All right, so good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the History in the Streets Lunch and Learn. My name is Rachel Williams, and I am the historian here at the History Center. I would like to welcome everyone joining us here in person, as well as everyone joining us live in the webinar. I'll make sure to leave time at the end for some questions, and for those joining us online, feel free to leave questions and comments in the chat, and Cheyenne will relay those to me. So I'd like to introduce History in the Streets for those who are not familiar. History in the Streets started back in October as a weekly series on our social media accounts. I created this series as a way to learn about the history of Orlando through the streets we travel every day. Summerlin, Bumby, Rosalind, Mills. These are streets that are well known and well traveled by the Orlando community. By learning about the stories behind the street names, we can gain a better understanding of Orlando's history. For this particular presentation, I'll be focusing on downtown Orlando and slightly expanding outwards. The streets I will be covering are the more well-known streets in the downtown area. Many of these streets have already been covered or will be covered in the social media series. However, this presentation provides more detailed information as social media captions can only be so long. This presentation discusses the stories behind the names of the streets, not the history of the streets themselves. However, in some cases, I will discuss the changes in street structure when it pertains to the changing of street names over time. Some streets are specifically named because their namesake resided on that particular street. Other streets are named simply in honor of notable figures in Orlando's history with no geographical connection to the street. I will be discussing the history of these historical figures, and in some cases their businesses, as well as the geography and landmarks which inspired some of these street names. So let's begin with Orange Avenue, the main artery of downtown Orlando. It may appear evident that a thoroughfare in Central Florida would bear the name of a citrus industry product. However, the nomenclature of this street owes its origins more to local historical geography than its association with the citrus industry. During the late 1800s, as the city of Orlando took shape and the street which became Orange Avenue was established, the northern end of the street led to an orange grove. These are some of the earliest photos we have of Orange Avenue, taken in 1876. On the left is Orange Avenue, looking north from Church Street, and on the right is Orange Avenue, looking north from Pine Street from a higher vantage point, likely from the roof of one of the buildings that can be seen on the left. So, for example, this photo, as you can see with my little laser pointer here, was probably taken on the top of one of these buildings. You can see this building over here in this photo. So it's just one block north and up on top of one of those roofs. So during that era, Robert Howe owned this orange grove and christened it Kalorama Grove. In 1893, the grove achieved historical significance by yielding the largest orange ever recorded at the time, weighing 3¼ pounds and measuring 18 inches in circumference. This is a photo of Kalorama Grove, which you can see here in the foreground. And this would be Lake Concord, and then in the distance here, we have Lake Ivanhoe. So it is not necessarily the fruit itself that lends its name to Orange Avenue, but rather its location at the end of this thriving orange grove. As apparent today, Orange Avenue has been a hub for business and commerce since it was first established. It is also the dividing line that separates the east and west sides of streets in the downtown area. Orange Avenue originally extended from Mark Street to the north side of Lake Lucerne. In 1956, Mayor J. Rolfe Davis inaugurated the Davis Causeway, a pivotal development connecting downtown Orlando to South Downtown. This causeway elevated a roadway over Lake Lucerne, linking Orange Avenue to Cole Avenue. Cole Avenue, named after Burkhard Cole, was the designation for the stretch of road from the south side of Lake Lucerne down to Kissimmee before the construction of the Davis Causeway, and even remained that way 4 years after. In this photo, you can see an aerial view of downtown Orlando. Here we have I-4 and 408. This is Lake Lucerne, and then this piece here is the Davis Causeway. These maps illustrate the evolution of the infrastructure and street names for Orange and Cole Avenues. On the left, the 1926 map highlights Orange Avenue in blue, revealing its southern extension from Lake Lucerne with a disjointed termination. In green, Cole Avenue runs south all the way to Kissimmee. On the right, a contemporary Google map reflects the significant transformation. The blue shows Orange Avenue, which, thanks to the Davis Causeway, seamlessly traverses Lake Lucerne, extending to Kissimmee. In green, you can see Cole Avenue. So essentially, these two streets basically switched. In 1960, these streets underwent a name change in order to connect Orange Avenue's southern continuation by way of the Davis Causeway. This strategic renaming aimed to simplify the street names, reducing confusion for travelers in the city. Now let's delve into the history of the individual for whom Cole Avenue is named. Originally hailing from Germany, Burkhard Cole and his brother Edward relocated to Orlando in 1873 from Mississippi. Burkhard owned a popular candy and ice cream parlor, initially situated on the north side of West Church Street. He later relocated the store to Orange Avenue and then again to Pine Street, which I believe is the location of the photo taken here in the slide. Burkhard Cole acquired a parcel of land in what we now refer to as SoDo, or South Downtown, which stretched from Gore Avenue to Lake Copeland. Here, he established Annie Street, which he named in honor of his wife. In a philanthropic gesture, he donated part of this land to the city, facilitating the widening of the Old Country Road into a city street. In recognition of his contribution, the city bestowed upon the street his namesake. Meanwhile, Burkhard's brother, Edward Cole, a skilled builder, collaborated with James Delaney to erect a substantial three-story brick building on East Pine Street and Magnolia Avenue in 1886. This edifice, known as the Cole-Delaney Block, stands as a testament to their partnership and the impact on Orlando's architectural landscape. The name Delaney likely resonates with many of you. Delaney Avenue, Delaney Park, and the now closed Delaney Elementary School all bear the imprint of Mr. James Delaney, a highly regarded merchant in early Orlando. And you can see Delaney here with his family in this photo. He made a pivotal move from Covington, Georgia to Orlando in 1875, driven by the burgeoning citrus industry. Acquiring 40 acres of land bordering Lake Lucerne and Lake Cherokee, he planted an orange grove, only to face its demise some 20 years later during the Great Freeze of 1894 and 1895. However, adversity was not unfamiliar to Mr. Delaney. In 1884, his wooden-framed grocery store at Pine and Magnolia fell victim to the most devastating fire Orlando had experienced at the time. The structure was razed, and the entire inventory of the store was lost. Delaney collaborated with Edward Cole to reconstruct the store and expand into additional office space, resulting in the three-story brick building which still stands today. Presently, this structure is the home of various bars, including Mather's Social Gathering, named after a furniture store that once occupied the premises in between the 1930s and the 1980s. Displayed here are photographs of the Delaney Cole building. The left image, captured in the mid to late 1890s, features the old 1892 brick courthouse in the background, which you can see in this area. On the right is a snapshot of the 1940s, a snapshot from the 1940s, showcases the building during its tenure as the Mather Furniture Establishment. In 1886, the same year that the new brick building was finalized, Mr. Delaney assumed the role of postmaster, a position he held until 1890. Notably, his daughter Claudia would follow in his footsteps to become Orlando's first postmistress in 1923. The city honored James Delaney's legacy by naming Delaney Avenue after him in 1928. The now closed Delaney Elementary School, which has been reestablished into the Beardall Senior Center, first opened in the early 1920s bearing his name. As I previously mentioned, the Cole Delaney building is located on Pine Street. This street and some others have somewhat obvious geographical reasons for their names. So let's go ahead and discuss some of those while we're on the subject. Pine Street is named for the abundance of pine trees in the area during the pioneer days. Central Florida utilized the native pine in a number of ways throughout its history, such as in construction and in the extraction of turpentine. In this photo from 1883, you can see Pine Street looking east from Orange Avenue, and the Charleston house can be seen on the right. Central Boulevard was considered the partition line of the north and south parts of town in the initial layout of Orlando. Just like how Orange Avenue is the dividing street for east and west streets downtown, Central Boulevard is the dividing line for streets that run north and south. This is a photo of Central Boulevard looking west from Magnolia Avenue during the late 1930s. So that means that if the camera could turn to the right, to this side, we would see the property which we are currently located. However, it would be blocked by the 1892 courthouse, which would have been standing when this photo was taken. This is another photo of Central Boulevard, this one looking east. This was likely taken from the 1880s to 1890s. You can see Lake Eola and an orange grove in the foreground. Lastly, I'd also like to talk about South Street, which unfortunately I don't have a photo of. But it was named because it was the original southern boundary of Orlando before the city was incorporated in 1875. Another notable street with a name tied to a landmark is Church Street. Despite the array of churches that now grace its path, a Presbyterian, Baptist, and Lutheran church on East Church Street, and the historic Ebenezer United Methodist Church, now known as the Greater Refuge Memorial Church on West Church Street, the current religious institutions were not the inspiration for the street's name. In the 1860s, a two-room log house served as both a place of worship and a school. The early gatherings of the Baptist, Methodist, Episcopal, and Presbyterian congregations originated in this log house, bestowing the name Church Street upon the dirt road where it was located. Though no surviving photos capture the first church house, the left image offers an early glimpse of West Church Street in 1876, while the right presents West Church Street in 1883. The photos vividly portray the rapid development of Orlando in its early years. In 1907, Church Street became Orlando's first brick-paved street and initially stretched from the railroad tracks to Magnolia Avenue. However, at the time, Magnolia Avenue went by a different name. It wasn't until 1960 that Magnolia Avenue got its name. Before that, it was called Main Street, initially conceived as Orlando's primary thoroughfare, with each iteration of county courthouse placed on the street, including the building we are currently in. However, Orange Avenue organically assumed the role as the city's main street. Excuse me. Here, the left photo shows Main Street located looking north near Central Boulevard in 1893, with Lake Eola just outside of the frame to the right. The prominent white house here was the initial residence of the Summerlin family, who we will talk about later in the presentation. And the photo on the right shows Main Street looking south, and it includes an Episcopal church and the 1892 courthouse here in the distance. Previously known as Main Street, the thoroughfare extended north from Lake Lucerne to the south side of Livingston Street. Separately, Magnolia Avenue existed to the east of Main Street, about a block east, which extended 2 blocks south of Livingston and then continued north. Aiming for simplicity and convenience akin to the renaming of Orange and Cole Avenue, city commissioners officially changed the name of Main Street to Magnolia in 1960. Here are maps to illustrate the evolving infrastructure of these streets over time. On the left is the 1926 map, featuring Main Street in blue, Magnolia Avenue in green, and Rosalind Avenue, which we will explore later, in purple. The map on the right depicts the current street layout. In today's map, the green represents what was formerly known or what was formerly Magnolia, to the south of Livingston Street, and is now known as Palmetto Avenue. The disjointed blue represents the current Magnolia Avenue, requiring a turn onto Livingston for continuity. The purple retains its identity as Rosalind, now curving and transforming into Magnolia at Livingston. It seems these changes in the street layout were made in order to create more space for buildings in the area. However, I'm not sure the street pattern is more convenient or less confusing, but I digress. The transformation from Main Street to Magnolia Avenue occurred in 1960, aligning with the renaming of Cole Avenue and Moore Avenue. It is also worth noting that in 1962, a city ordinance standardized the designation of roadways. North-south routes became avenues, while east-west routes became streets. Exceptions were granted to certain roads, such as Central Boulevard, Colonial Drive, and Washington Trail. Anyway, Magnolia Avenue, situated on the north side of Livingston Street, derives its name from the large magnolia trees on the raised grounds of a large home built by Daniel Robinson. Erected in 1884, the residence was one of the original structures in what is now known as the Lake Eola Heights neighborhood. Robinson resided in this home until 1902, after it underwent several tenant ownership. In the early 1910s, the owners transformed the home, reshaping the original colonial revival style into a classical revival mansion through extensive renovations to the front facade. In 1948, the Dameron family acquired the property. Under their meticulous stewardship, the residence underwent a comprehensive remodel, culminating in its rebirth as a distinguished 12-room hotel known as Magnolia Manor. The Damerons closed the hotel and sold the property in 1954, and the structure has been home to various business offices since. Displayed on the left is a photograph showing the home on Magnolia Avenue, likely when it was owned by Robinson. If you look closely, you can see some magnolia trees in the front yard. And on the right, we can see a more recent photo of the structure, likely in the 1950s, when it was a hotel. Note, the home still stands. However, there have been deliberations in the last few years surrounding the potential relocation of what was known as Magnolia Manor to Amelia Street, which is a few blocks away from its current location. I mentioned Samuel Robinson, the man who built the home on Magnolia, for which the street is named. As you may be aware, there is also a street named Robinson Street. This street is named after the very same Samuel Robinson, who came to Orlando in 1876 from Michigan to help his brother maintain an orange grove in the area that is now known as Lake Eola Heights, where the home was built. Beyond his role as a home builder, Robinson's multifaceted contributions shaped Orlando's landscape. His versatile engagements included serving as alderman, tax collector and assessor, school trustee, civil engineer, and served 2 years in the state legislature. Notably, he surveyed downtown Orlando and other areas in Orange County, as well as Greenwood Cemetery when it was established in 1888. The image on the right gives a glimpse into Robinson's survey book, capturing his meticulous work in mapping downtown Orlando, including the street that bears his name, which is, where's my cursor? Right here. Before adopting the name Robinson Street, it was known as North Street, marking the northern perimeter of Jacob Summerlin's property, encompassing what we recognize today as Lake Eola. Speaking of Jacob Summerlin, let's explore the prominent figure behind Summerlin Avenue. As you may have noticed, I have mentioned Jacob Summerlin a number of times so far in this presentation. He was quite an influential character in the history of Orlando, so therefore this section is kind of lengthy, so settle in. Born in Alachua County in February 1820, Jacob Summerlin is believed to be the first American child born in Florida after Spain ceded the area in 1819. From a young age, Summerlin worked raising cattle alongside his father. As he got older, he inherited 20 slaves, which he traded for 6,000 range cattle and earned the moniker Cattle King of Florida. During the Civil War, he worked as a contractor supplying beef to the Confederate Army. After the war, he traversed the state, buying and selling cattle from St. Augustine to Cape Coral. Despite residing in modest conditions during his travels, he was recognized as one of Florida's wealthiest individuals. These, these images, often associated with Jacob Summerlin, are subject to some scrutiny. On the left is what is known as the bullwhip picture. In the picture, Summerlin is smoking a pipe, but records state that Summerlin actually never smoked. On the right he is wearing a suit, which those who knew him stated he never wore a suit or even owned one, but instead always dressed like that of the man on the left. So the pipe in the photo on the left could be a prop, or it could be that neither of these photos are of Jacob Summerlin. However, these photos are what you find when searching for him. Utilizing his wealth, Summerlin contributed significantly to Florida's development. In 1867, he acquired land in present-day Bartow, donating 120 acres for churches, the county seat, and the Summerlin Institute, the first brick school south of Jacksonville, pioneering the free school system in Bartow. The Summerlin Institute officially opened in 1868, but by that time, Summerlin moved his family to Flemington, Georgia, so his children could receive an education from one of the best academies in the South. The family remained in Georgia for 5 years. And here you can see a photo of the Summerlin Institute around 1901. In 1873, the Summerlin family returned to Florida and settled in Orlando. A year later, Mr. Summerlin purchased 200 acres on what was then referred to simply as the lake. In 1875, he built a large home for his family off of Main Street, which, as we just discussed, is now called Magnolia Avenue. This residence became the main social and political hub of the 1870s, serving as the largest dwelling in the community at the time. The Summerlin family frequently hosted temporary guests, providing accommodation for travelers in need. These images show the first Summerlin home. The left photo shows the rear of the house, likely during some construction, evident from the wood beams lying in the foreground. And on the right is a photo of the side of the house, featuring the family orange grove on the property. Over the years, Summerlin remodeled and expanded the home, transforming it into a hotel known as the Summerlin Hotel. Subsequently relocated from Main Street to Washington Street, the Summerlin Hotel gained a reputation as one of the area's most distinguished hotels. And here is a photo of the first Summerlin home, as it was known as Summerlin Hotel on East Washington Street. After opening the hotel, the Summerlin's second residence emerged on the south side of Lake Eola, situated at Central Boulevard and Liberty Avenue. In subsequent years, this second home underwent a change in ownership and purpose, also becoming a hotel known as the Dweller Hotel. In 1875, Summerlin played a pivotal role in preserving Orlando as the county seat, countering Henry Sanford's attempt to relocate it to his newly established town. For context, in 1870, General Henry S. Sanford purchased land in Mellonville, which he later renamed after himself and became known as Sanford. There, he built a hotel, a church, large orange groves, and platted the town. At the time, the town of Sanford was part of Orange County until the establishment of Seminole County in 1913. General Sanford sought to make his new town the county seat, pledging to construct a courthouse. Sanford made his proposal at a county commissioners meeting, which Summerlin also attended. Determined to retain Orlando as the county seat, Summerlin offered $10,000 on the spot to build a new courthouse in Orlando. He assured that if the county could not repay him, there would be no obligation. Summerlin's proposal prevailed, and the county did reimburse him, albeit after a decade. This is a photo of the 1875 courthouse that was funded by Jacob Summerlin. This courthouse was the city's third official courthouse and sat on the same property that the History Center now sits. In 1892, a new courthouse construction was underway, prompting the relocation of the courthouse that was funded by Summerlin. It found a new home on the corner of Church and Main Street, again, now Magnolia, to be incorporated with the Tremont Hotel. The photo on the left here shows the 1875 courthouse in transit along Main Street, again, Magnolia, passing Pine Street. And you can see here the turret of the Rogers building. And then here we have, again, the Cole Delaney building that we talked about. On the right is a photo of the Tremont Hotel with the center apex being revealing the preserved structure of the original courthouse. This architectural integration reflects a unique blend of history within the Tremont Hotel's facade. Unfortunately, the Tremont Hotel was torn down in 1956. In 1883, Jacob Summerlin generously gifted the land encircling Lake Eola to the city under the condition that it be enhanced into a park for the community. The city adhered to this vision, adorning the park with trees and even incorporating a racetrack for horses. Although Lake Eola Park no longer features a racetrack, it remains a cherished locale for walks, community gatherings, and regular farmers markets. We owe the existence of this vibrant park to Jacob Summerlin, and it is in recognition of his contributions that Orlando named a street after him. We should also discuss the naming of Lake Eola, plus there's a street which bears the lake's name, Eola Drive. Initially called East Street due to its location on the eastern edge of Summerlin's property, the city officially renamed the street Eola Drive in 1923. Jacob Summerlin's connection with Lake Eola extends to its naming. Before his 1883 acquisition, the lake was simply referred to as the lake, and its sandy surroundings was known as Sandy Beach. The lake's name has a variety of possible origin stories, with the most widespread one attributing to Robert Summerlin, one of Jacob's sons, who supposedly named it after a sweetheart. Some stories even go as far to say that this sweetheart died of typhoid fever weeks before Robert was supposed to marry her. However, historical records do not support this claim, and there's been no evidence of a girl named Eola in Orlando. Local historian Robert Cronin investigated further and found that there could be a possible explanation in Flemington, Georgia. According to census records, when the Summerlin family lived in Georgia, the children, including Robert, attended school with a girl named Eula Lee Way, who went by the nickname Eula, E-U-L-A. Cronin proposes that the lake was intended to be named Lake Eula after his childhood friend. However, a surveyor hired by Jacob Summerlin in the mid-1870s might have misheard or misspelled the name, resulting in the lake being known as Lake Eola to history. So we've covered the transformations of North Street, now Robinson Street, and East Street, now Eola Drive. Now let's explore the evolution of West Street, presently known as Rosalind Avenue. The street underwent a name change in 1919, adopting the moniker of the Rosalind Club. Established in 1894, the Rosalind Club originated from an event hosted by the Lucerne Club, a local men's social club where a ball was organized for the cultured ladies of Orlando. Following a serendipitous encounter between two attendees the day after the ball, the decision was made to create a women's counterpart to the Lucerne Club. Initially called the Ladies' Social Club for the first 3 months, it underwent a transformation and became the Wimedassus Club, a contraction of wives, mothers, daughters, and sisters. In 1895, the club president, Anna Pell Clark, suggested that the club adopt the name Rosalind. The name, inspired by the female protagonist in Shakespeare's play As You Like It, resonated with the members who shared a love for Shakespeare and drew a connection between Rosalind's love story with Andrew Du Bois and the club's affection for the city of Orlando. Following a vote, although not unanimously favored, the name Rosalind prevailed as the majority choice, marking a significant chapter in the club's history. In its early years, the club gathered in a room at the Armory building, later relocating to 2 rooms in the Rogers building as the membership expanded. In 1903, fundraising efforts allowed the club to erect its own clubhouse on Orange Avenue, which is located at the site where the Angebilt Hotel building currently sits. In 1916, the Rosalind Club moved once more, acquiring 4 lots on the west side of Lake Eola on West Street to construct a new clubhouse. In 1919, the club made a request to the city that West Street be renamed to Poinsettia Avenue, to which Mayor James Giles responded by naming the street after the club itself. Today, the Rosalind Club remains active, conducting meetings in its 1916 clubhouse situated on the street that bears the social club's name. In the photo on the left here is the 1916 clubhouse. The photo is likely from the 1970s. And on the right is a 1917 aerial photo of Lake Eola, and the clubhouse can be seen right here. Another well-known street that runs through downtown Orlando is Washington Street. You may initially think that this street is named for the first president of the United States, George Washington, but you would be wrong. The street is actually named for Washington Kilmer, a physician who arrived in Central Florida in 1875. Kilmer came to Florida from Ohio and made the journey entirely on foot and settled in Altamont Springs. He's even credited with naming the area Altamont, but without the E at the end, as it reminded him of a village in his home state of New York. In Altamont, Kilmer built a home and planted an orange grove. He opened a medical practice in Orlando, where he eventually moved a few years later to be closer to his patients. In 1887, yellow fever broke out in Tampa, and Washington Kilmer was among the first doctors to travel to Tampa and assist sick patients. While in Tampa, Kilmer contracted the sickness, but eventually recovered. Upon his return home, the citizens of Orlando presented Kilmer with a gold watch and chain that was engraved with words of gratitude for his service. Washington Kilmer resided on the street that bears his name until his passing in 1919. And this is a 1932 photo of Washington Street looking west from Magnolia. On the left, you can see the building that we are currently in, which at that time it would have been the county courthouse. Colonial Drive is among the most well-known and frequently traveled streets in Orlando. The street was originally comprised of disjointed roads running from east to west, each one named after pioneer families such as Wallace, Sweet, Beauclair, and Points. Frederick Luter, a real estate operator who relocated to Orlando from North Carolina in 1884, held extensive land between the railroad and Broadway Avenue, thus including these disjointed streets. He focused on consolidating and extending these east-west roadways into one cohesive street to simplify travel. The credit for naming the newly unified street goes to Jeanette Robinson Murphy, the niece of Samuel Robinson. She envisioned the avenue adorned with, quote, stately colonial mansions, unquote. Although the Colonial Drive of today greatly differs from this vision, the name still remains. And this picture is of Colonial Drive near the Mills intersection. So like Mills would be here, and you're going that way to Colonial. Likely in the mid-1950s when the road was being widened. Speaking of Mills Avenue, let's talk about the man the street is named for. Newton L. Mills came to Orlando from Iowa in 1882 and quickly became a partner of the Sinclair Real Estate Company, emerging as one of Orlando's earliest and most successful real estate salesmen. He held key leadership positions in the Orlando area, serving as the president of the South Florida Foundry and Machine Works, and later as the president of the Orlando Street Railway Company in 1888. In 1885, Mr. Mills played a pivotal role in financing the construction of a low-lying frame structure on the west side of Lake Eola at the current site of the Rosalind Clubhouse. The following year, the structure opened for the first public agricultural display in Orlando, which served as the precursor for the Central Florida Exposition. The challenges brought by the big freeze of 1894 and 1895, coupled with the ensuing economic downturn in Florida, prompted Mr. Mills to relocate to Houston, Texas. There, he established a successful real estate and investment company, reportedly generating $1 million in business. And this is a photo of Mr. Mills in his Houston real estate office. It's one of the only photos I could find of him. He was known for his booming voice, jovial personality, and large stature, standing at 6'4". During his tenure in Orlando, Mr. Mills acquired land along East Central Boulevard on the south side of Lake Eola, establishing his residence at the intersection of Central and Osceola Avenue. On the south side of the lake, where the World of Beer currently sits, Mills enclosed a triangular piece of land with an iron fence and erected a modest wooden bandstand. Within this park, he kept wildlife such as deer and turkeys, creating a quaint tourist attraction which became known as Mills Park. And here in these photos, you can see Mills Park. You can see visitors of all ages interacting with deer. It's like there's a deer here and over here by this lady. And you can also see the bandstand. And then in the distance, if you look closely, you can also see Lake Eola. Oh, not on that page yet. Concluding our street exploration, let's delve into Bumby Avenue, named after Joseph Bumby, an English immigrant who arrived in Orlando with his family in 1873. Some historical accounts suggest that the Bumby family originally intended to move to Denver, Colorado, but stopped in Orlando to visit cousins that had recently settled in the area. Enamored with the town, they chose to make Orlando their permanent home. Mr. Bumby established a 160-acre homestead on the east side of town, cultivating an orange grove. The Bumby family residence stood proudly at the southeast corner of Bumby Avenue and Central Boulevard. There is currently a sign on the side of Bumby Avenue indicating the location of the Bumby homestead. During the maturation of the orange trees, Mr. Bumby undertook the arduous task of delivering mail on horseback between Orlando and Mellonville, now Sanford, a journey spanning 6 hours each way. With the advent of the railroad coming to Orlando in 1880, Mr. Bumby, drawing upon his prior railroad industry experience in England, assumed the role of Orlando's first railroad agent. He constructed a small frame building on the north side of Church Street, serving as a freight office, as well as storage for hay and grain. And this is a photo of Mr. Bumby with his sons in front of his hardware store, and you can see Bumby there in the center. In the mid-1880s, Joseph Bumby secured land on the west side of Church Street, adjacent to Church Street Station, crafting what would be known as the Bumby Block. Pioneering Orlando's architectural landscape, he erected the city's first brick buildings on this block. In 1886, Bumby opened Orlando's first hardware store, aptly named Bumby Hardware, which swiftly became a company community fixture, proudly promoting the slogan, "If you can't find it, go to Bumby's." The hardware business later evolved into a family enterprise as Bumby's sons established branch locations in Winter Garden and Winter Park. Bumby's passing in 1911 did not signal the end of the family commitment to the hardware business. They continued operating the stores until 1966. The decision to close was influenced by the arrival of Montgomery Ward to Orlando in the early 1960s, intensifying competition for small business. Notably, at the time of closure, it stood as the oldest continuously operated family-owned business in the same Orlando location. The Bumby Block on Church Street thrived during Orlando's pioneer era, witnessing fluctuations in business and foot traffic as the city expanded. In the 1970s, it underwent a revitalization with establishments like Cheyenne Saloon and Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Emporium, both owned by Bob Snow. Today, the original brick buildings still stand, with the original Bumby hardware store now housing Hamburger Mary's. These streets represent only a small fraction of the rich tapestry of downtown Orlando's roadways. Countless more streets weave fascinating histories within our community. I hope that you enjoyed learning about the history behind the street names, and I hope that as you leave here today, you see your route home with a new perspective and better understanding of Orlando's historical context. Be sure to follow the History Center social media platforms to follow along with more History in the Streets content. And now I will open it up to questions, and I will ask that if you do have a question to raise your hand and wait. We have a microphone that will come around to you so everyone can hear you, including those on the virtual cast. Question over here. She's coming.
I'm coming.
If you could just leave your hand up too so she can find you. Right there.
Hi.
Thank you. I have a question about Jacob Summerlin. You said he was the first person born in Florida. Was it after the ceding of Florida to the United States?
Correct.
Okay, and that was 1872?
So it was seeded in 1819. He was born in 1820.
1820.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The question was that Jacob Summerlin was the first American born in Florida after the ceding of Spain, and he was just clarifying, I guess.
I'm sorry?
You were just clarifying that, yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Other questions?
The pictures that you had of Lake Eola, do you know if you have any in the archives? I don't hear it on.
I was like, it says that it is on, yes.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. There was at one time a wooden two-story apartment building on Lake Eola. I haven't been able to find any pictures of it, but I lived there when I was a baby. My grandparents owned it. And I just wondered if there were any documentation of that building and when it was torn down.
Yeah, so she was asking about a wooden, you said two-story building on Lake Eola, wondering if we had any photos of it as an apartment building. We might. If you want, we can get together, I can give you my information, and we can look to see if we have any photos of it. I would just have to know, like, if it's on the north side, the south side. A lot of times these photos are of specific structures, unless it's something like the Summerlin house. We do have a photo of the second Summerlin house, but if they're, a lot of times they're just random photos of the lake, and then in the background you can see structures and stuff. So potentially, but we would definitely have to look.
No, my question was with the house that she's talking about around Lake Eola, because we had a fraternity house that was on Lake Eola that was a very, very old structure that actually faced Lake Eola. And I was wondering if that may be the house she's talking about, because it was a solid 2.5 story house, and if that could be it, and it had 10 bedrooms.
Interesting. So for everyone that didn't hear, you said it was a fraternity house?
Yes, Pi Chi O, then Pi Kappa Alpha.
Okay, so there was a fraternity house also on Lake Eola, also a two-story building. That could have potentially been, because a lot of times these structures, they'll be hotels and then they'll change into apartment buildings, or they could be repurposed in a number of different ways. So there's a possibility that it could be the same. That could be a different one entirely. Right. So it could absolutely be possible. No, I could, again, if I can give you guys cards, and then we can link up and get more information, find out some things. Any other questions? Up here.
I was just wondering, the photo of Mr. Mills sitting at his desk, it said it was from the Houston archives. Do you know how that wound up being from there and not?
Yeah, so he moved to Houston after the Great Freeze here, because a lot of his land was affected. So he was losing money here, so he ended up moving to Houston and running a real estate and investment company there. So I looked through their archives and found that photo. Over here, Cheyenne.
I was wondering, is there any documentation of how long Washington's walk from up north to Florida was?
I mean, I'm sure we could probably get like a guess. We could just plug in, I don't know where in Ohio he was from. It just said he was from Ohio. Sorry, for those who didn't hear, we're talking about Washington Kilmer's walk from Ohio to Florida. I don't know where he started in Ohio, but we could probably, if we wanted to just pick somewhere in the middle of Ohio and see Google Maps how long it would take to walk that. So, yeah. Any other questions? Back here in the blue, we're just making you run back and forth.
You mentioned something about a horse racetrack around Lake Eola that Mr. Summerlin had before he donated the land. Do you have any photographs or any information about that?
So the question was about the racetrack that went around Lake Eola after Summerlin had given the land to the city. I've tried to find pictures of it as a racetrack, and I couldn't find any that we have in our archive, or even really information. I wasn't sure if it was just like casual, like racing with like their horse and buggy, or if it was like actual, like scheduled, races with prizes and stuff. The information I found out about it was very vague, and I also don't know when it ended. So I'm not entirely sure, but I just do have some reports of it momentarily at least being a racetrack. Any other questions? No? Do we have any questions in the chat? Oh, Ironton, so we can plug that in to Google and see how, of course, the routes may have been different, so we can like give or take a day onto that. But yeah, very interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much for your questions. And thank you again for joining us.